Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Justice Rouleau released his report on if the Trudeau Liberals were justified in invoking the Emergencies Act during the Freedom Convoy last winter. We have reaction. A case involving a Lethbridge mom who's charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life for a baby was back in court. And the Lethbridge International Air Show is ready to take flight this summer. BCN's Micah Quinn has the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The report by Justice Paul Rouleau on if the Trudeau government was in the right to invoke the Emergencies Act last February during the Freedom Convoy was released today. Commissioner Rouleau says the federal government met the very high threshold needed to invoke the act. In his report, he says the lawful protest descended into lawlessness, culminating in a national emergency. He also added that in his view, there was credible and compelling information supporting a reasonable belief that the definition of a threat to the security of Canada was met.
What was surprising was the size and scale of these protests and the way in which they proliferated across the country. The majority of those who participated in the protest were animated by a genuine desire to engage in peaceful demonstrations so that their voices would be heard by leaders in government. They wished to exercise their fundamental right to express their political views, and they had a right to do so. However, like any large group, there were a diversity of views and intentions among the participants of the Freedom Convoy. Amongst the many who intended to protest peacefully were others who had more sinister goals or who were willing to engage in dangerous conduct to achieve their desired ends.
Protesters with the Freedom Convoy were angry with the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which included vaccine requirements for truckers. It was the first time the law had been triggered since it was created back in 1988. An NDP MP responded to the report released by Justice Paul Rouleau. Hamilton Centre MP Matthew Green agrees with the government invoking the Emergencies Act.
And in the report, it is clear that Justice Rouleau believes that at the highest standards, the thresholds for the invocation of the Act were met. And in reading it this morning, I think one of our key takeaways is that this report should serve as a warning to Canadians about what happens when there is a failure at all levels of government, in policing, and in societal cohesion.
Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre discussed the release of the Public Order Emergency Commission's final report on the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act. Poilievre says many Canadians were so frustrated during the pandemic that they felt like they had no choice but to head to Ottawa to have their voices heard.
A lot of people were so helpless and so desperate, they ended up participating in a protest in Ottawa. This was an emergency that Justin Trudeau created by attacking his own population, by driving up their cost of living, by making it impossible for people to pay their bills and live their lives in peace. He caused the emergency that unfolded. And then when he caused it, he piled on, he poured more gasoline on the fire with nasty insults, jabbing his finger in the faces of his own citizens.
Keith Wilson is a lawyer who's representing one of the Freedom Convoy organizers, Tamara Leach. Now, Mr. Wilson offered up his thoughts on Justice Rouleau's report that was released earlier today. He says this was a very dark day for Canada.
It's a historic day for Canada, unfortunately. All of us know what was happening in Canada for the previous 3 years and the serious effects that mandates had on Canadians. And here we had protesters challenging government decision-making, doing it lawfully, peacefully protesting. And Justice Rouleau has signaled to this government and future governments that that's all it takes now. We don't need a world war. We don't need like the FLQ crisis of bombings and kidnappings. All we need is for a government to be uncomfortable and police to be disorganized in order to invoke the Emergencies Act and strip Canadians of their fundamental rights and freedoms, to freeze their bank accounts, both business and personal. It's a dark day for Canada. We're no longer true, nor strong, and free. I hope Canadians don't accept this, that don't accept this as our fate, and that they're prepared to become more politically active and be vocal with political parties, because this law needs to change. This cannot be the threshold for a government without due process to strip Canadians and freeze bank accounts. It's not a good day. We're no longer the true north, strong and free.
Alberta Justice Minister Tyler Shandro, in a release earlier today, says the Emergencies Act was unnecessary and invoking it set a very dangerous precedent. Alberta MP John Barlow says the Trudeau government is simply out of touch. Barlow is making reference to the various taxes, which he says continue to hurt so many of our farmers and ranchers.
If they are defending farmers by using them as an ATM to pay for their out-of-control spending. Right. Most farm and ranch families have multi-generational homes on their properties. This tax will cost them tens of thousands of dollars. Even if the tax does not apply to them, the Liberals are threatening with fines up to $10,000 if they don't do the paperwork. Isn't it enough? This Liberal government is milking Canadian farmers with carbon taxes and punitive policy. Will the Liberals give farmers a break and exempt agriculture from yet another Liberal tax?
Our government has always defended farmers and will always be there for farmers. Obviously, there's always some issues that will arise, and I've mentioned climate change has been a major issue for farmers, affecting farmers, whether it was in Eastern Canada or out west with the droughts. We'll always be there to defend farmers, and I'll be happy to work with the honourable member on the issue that he's raised. Thank you.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada is continuing to work with the United States to answer questions about unidentified aerial objects recently shot down over North America. While U.S. President Joe Biden says the objects were likely benign, Trudeau says their nature is still unknown.
We will be working with our American partners on protection of the North American airspace. This is something that every step of the way we've done together through my conversations with Biden and other top officials, through the work that we do together in NORAD in keeping North American airspace safe for civilian traffic and free from threats. We still don't know exactly what those objects were. We do know, however, that they posed a reasonable threat to civilian air travel, and that's why we needed to take action, because the safety of Canadians and of people traveling legally through our airspace needs to be top of mind for us at all times.
Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and Alberta Premier Daniel Smith spoke to the National Coalition of Chiefs Clean Energy Summit today. Government officials say the agenda was how government is working with First Nation leaders on Canada's transition to clean energy. The summit is taking place at the Tsuut'ina Nation, located west of Calgary. Poilievre and Smith have both been critical of the Trudeau government's plan to transition the labour force to more renewable energy. A Lethbridge mother accused in the case involving an infant who was believed to have been sexually assaulted by her parents last month will be staying behind bars for the time being. Angela Stewart has been following this case closely and joins us now from outside of the Lethbridge courthouse. Angela, what's the latest?
Yeah, Hal, what I can tell you is the mother accused will remain in custody for at least another week before a bail hearing will get underway. Defense counsel John Oman, who appeared via CCTV footage, told the court Friday morning he is working to find an appropriate residence for the accused. When a housing option has been sorted out, they will then be able to move ahead with a bail hearing. For 4 weeks now, the matter has been adjourned, and during a previous hearing last week, Oman told the court that the file is moving along and they were not seeking bail at the time. The mother did not make an appearance as it was waived by her defense. Meanwhile, the father accused, who has been charged separately, has not had his matter back in court since February 3rd. On January 18th, police were called to a home on the north side of the city after receiving a child abuse tip from the public. It's alleged a 6-week-old baby girl had been repeatedly abused and her injuries were extensive. She was taken to Alberta Children's Hospital, where she remains in critical condition. Her 52-year-old father has been charged with aggravated assault, sexual interference, and failing to provide the necessaries of life. Her 31-year-old mother has been charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life. Neither is being named to protect the baby's identity. The father and mother both remain in custody at the Lethbridge Correctional Centre. Their matters will be back in court on February 24th. Hal?
Thanks so much, Angela. That was BCN's Angela Stewart outside of the Lethbridge courthouse. The final verdict date for street preacher turned leader of the Independence Party of Alberta, Arthur Pawlowski, is set for May 2nd at the Lethbridge courthouse. Pawlowski is being charged with inciting mischief, counseling interference with critical infrastructure, and failing to keep the peace when he spoke at the Coots border blockade last winter. Pawlowski's pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. Bridge City News will be at the courthouse in May to cover the trial. Lethbridge police are investigating a report of a threat at Chinook High School. Officials say the threat was written on school property on Thursday. The investigation is ongoing to determine the veracity of the threat, but there was no evidence to suggest an immediate risk. Classes proceeded as normal today with an increased police presence. No other information was provided by the LPS. Toronto police have charged two 17-year-old boys in a drive-by shooting at a city high school. The suspects were arrested earlier today and face a number of charges, including attempted murder, discharging a firearm with intent, and possession of property obtained by crime. A 15-year-old boy remains in critical condition, but stable condition, after he was shot in the parking lot of Weston Collegiate Institute yesterday. Well, it was great being above zero once again today here in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, the mild temps should continue this weekend before things go a little south?
Going south. Yeah, I like the sound of that. But no, you are right, Hal. Definitely things are about to take a turn for the worse otherwise. For now, though, we are still looking at fairly mild conditions and some strong winds. We're looking at an overnight low of -2 this evening with some 60-kilometer-per-hour winds. Into Saturday, looking decent with that 3-degree high. But keep in mind, we are seeing the possibilities of some flurries as well. After that, Sunday should be lovely before getting back into Old Man Winter, and I will have all those details for you coming up later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Well, it may be a little brown here in Lethbridge, but we're told there's plenty of snow in the mountains. This coming weekend is the Family Day long weekend in Alberta, and if you're planning to do some skiing or snowboarding, it might be the perfect time. Castle Mountain Ski Resort is planning some very special activities for the weekend, but don't let the lack of snow concern you.
I can certainly empathize with why people may be concerned about ski and snowboard conditions. I was in Lethbridge just the other day, and it's brown, as I like to say, brown town. And it's like being transported to another world, headed into the Rockies. You know, we're looking at about 1.6 meters, so about 160 centimeters of settled snow depth at our mid-mountain snow plot. Conditions are good. Thankfully, we ended up with about a foot last week and a foot this week. So this Saturday, we have our night skiing on green event. And what's unique about that is we don't actually have any permanent lighting here. So we literally truck in construction-style lighting plants and light up the green zone. It's a bit of a novelty, very cute. We see all kinds of folks out here, young and old alike, for night skiing on green. And so that'll take place on Saturday of Family Day weekend. On Sunday, we have an on-mountain scavenger hunt, and that's part of our regular programming throughout the winter season. But the long and the short of that is guests can look for hidden letters through the Huckleberry Chair Zone. And if they can unscramble them successfully, they can enter to win up to $250 worth of gift cards from other local businesses in the Castle region.
Looks like it should be a nice weekend for skiing. And by the way, the ski season at Castle Mountain tentatively runs until April the 9th. The Lethbridge International Air Show is ready to take flight once again this summer. Local dignitaries unveiled what the show will look like this year at a media availability earlier today. Now, as BCN's Micah Quinn explains, a large contingent of aviation experts and their airplanes are set to take off here in our city.
Lethbridge residents are invited to soar down to our city's airport from July 29th to the 30th for the 2023 Lethbridge International Air Show. Dallas Hardy, the president of the organization, told us the air show sold just over 16,000 tickets over the 2-day period in 2022. He said he's hoping to exceed that number in 2023.
In my mind, I'd like to see 25,000 plus. That's a huge number for this show, and I'd be smiling forever.
Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgin says the air show is an amazing way to get the community together to enjoy some high-flying activities.
So many, again, kids, families, people of all ages just absolutely love the International Air Show.
Dan Reeves, a pilot from Winnipeg, will be performing at the show this year, and he told us it's his 50th year that he's been involved in aviation.
So that takes me a while back. I've been a flying instructor since the mid-70s when I started doing some aerobatic work. And in the air show side of things, I started in about 2016 is when I first started getting involved in the air show community.
Staff from the air show said they are also looking for volunteers to set up, tear down, and help with security. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
That should be a lot of fun. Now, speaking of fun, the Helen Schuler Nature Center will be launching a new website. In the lead up to the launch, the Nature Center is hosting a Family Day long weekend scavenger hunt for families to learn all about what the new website will include. Now, an official with the center says the development for a new online platform has been long overdue as the pandemic delayed the process.
If you've been to the existing Nature Centre website, you'll know that it is within the main lethbridge.ca website, and there's a lot going on there. There's a ton of information, and for an attraction like the Nature Centre, having a standalone web presence, it was necessary. We have so many different programs, events, and things for people to take part in. Having that standalone experience will just make it easier for people to navigate and find the information that they need to plan the visit. And in terms of the process, we started work on the website just before the pandemic. And of course, the pandemic kind of rearranged all of our schedules and created a bit of a delay.
The Nature Center's new website will launch on Monday, February the 27th. Rare video has been released of the 1986 dive exploring the wreckage of the Titanic. The RMS Titanic sank in the North Atlantic Ocean on April 14th, back in 1912.
And then we came in on the starboard side of beam of the bridge. And the first thing I saw coming out of the gloom at 30 feet was this wall, this giant wall of riveted steel that rose over 100 and some feet above us. I never looked down at the Titanic. I looked up at the Titanic. Nothing was small. But then as we rose up its side, because we had to abort the dive at that point because we were taking water into our batteries. And as we rose up after that first dive that lasted just minutes, we began to see the portholes. And it was like people looking back at us. It was pretty haunting, actually.
Well, pretty amazing stuff. There are some here in the Christian community who are concerned that the left may be infiltrating the church. American author Lucas Miles wrote a book on the subject called The Christian Left, How Liberal Thought Has Hijacked the Church. And we asked Lucas Miles what he means by the Christian left.
The Christian left is a growing constituency of left-leaning Christians and so-called Christians oftentimes, or Christians in name only, who have embraced tenets of Marxism, critical race theory. They tend to be pro-abortion. They tend to be pro-LGBT. They oftentimes are trans-affirming. We're seeing the extreme version of these churches are actually hosting, drag shows at their churches. That's a new phenomenon happening here in the U.S. We actually had a church not too far from where I live host one at the end of last year.
Make sure you catch the full interview with author and podcaster Lucas Miles and BCN producer Michael Clausen coming up in the second half of our program. Well, if you're planning to have some friends over for a barbecue, it may not be a bad weekend for it here in Lethbridge. All of the weather details are coming up. Looks like kind of a decent weekend shaping up weather-wise across much of southwestern Alberta with some fairly mild temperatures. A good time to maybe throw a few shrimp on the barbie. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we better enjoy that barbecue party this weekend. For next week, it'll feel a lot more like winter again.
So true, Hal, because that is when things are about to take a drastic turn. Okay, so for now, we're still looking at mild temperatures. Into Saturday, we're seeing that high of 3 degrees. We are looking at periods of snow, possibly though. Into Sunday, nice and sunny day, 5 degrees the high. Now, Monday, we're looking at snow or rain. 0 is the high, and then everything's just going to take that downturn right there. Hello, welcome, old man winter. It's not spring yet, apparently, because we are expecting more snow on Tuesday. And not only that, look at that temperature, minus 15 the high, and it only gets worse from there, minus 19 the high on Wednesday with a 60% chance of flurries, and then a high of minus 20 on Thursday with a mix of sun and clouds. So yeah, if you don't like where things are going there, yeah, that's what's happening. We're going to see some minus 20 temperatures next week, unfortunately. Average high for this time of year, 2 degrees. Average low, minus 10. 16 was our high temperature on this day back in 1943. And in 1942, we had the chilliest, which was minus 33. Sun rose this morning at 7:38. Sun set this evening at 5:52. We're sitting at 10 hours and 14 minutes of daylight. Okay, we're looking at some showers on the west coast tomorrow. 60% chance of showers in both Victoria and Vancouver tomorrow. 9 the high expected in Victoria and Vancouver, sitting at 7 degrees tomorrow. 0 the high in Edmonton. Edmonton looking at periods of light snow. 60% chance of flurries expected tomorrow in Calgary with a high of 2 degrees. As we look to the prairies, we're seeing mainly cloudy conditions in Saskatoon, minus 5 the high there. We're looking at partly cloudy skies in Regina, minus 4 expected there, and minus 3 the high in Winnipeg tomorrow. Winnipeg looking at mainly sunny skies with some increasing cloud there. And speaking of increasing cloud, that's what's going to be happening across central Canada tomorrow too. 3 degrees the high in Toronto, minus 1 in Ottawa. Both of those cities looking at increasing clouds throughout the day. Montreal looking sunny in the morning, but looking at 40% chance of flurries by the afternoon, minus 1 the high there. Okay, in Atlantic Canada, lots of precipitation going on. So we're looking at a snowfall warning in effect this evening in Fredericton, looking at 5 centimeters. But tomorrow, mainly sunny skies, minus 4 the high there. Halifax looking at a freezing rain warning in effect this evening, and snowfall ending by the morning, minus 3 the high there. Minus 7 the high in Charlottetown tomorrow, looking at freezing rain and a 60% chance of more flurries tomorrow. Now St. John's looking at ice pellets, freezing rain and snow, expecting 5 to 15 centimeters by tomorrow, minus 3 the high there. So that is what's happening in your weather.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Air Canada's comeback from pandemic shutdowns appears to be gaining momentum as the airline posted a fourth quarter profit of $168 million. That compares to a loss of $493 million in the last 3 months of 2021. The airline says the improvement came as its passenger and operating revenues recovered to record record highs despite the storm-plagued Christmas travel season. It still posted a $1.7 billion loss for the year, however, amid a rocky recovery from COVID-19 restrictions. Canada's largest airline also announced plans to increase its so-called available seat miles by 50% in the first quarter of this year. Company officials say they expect capacity to reach pre-pandemic levels by next year. TransAlta announced a $25 million deal to purchase 50% interest in an early-stage pumped hydro energy storage development project in southwestern Alberta. The Calgary company says it will jointly manage the Tent Mountain Renewable Energy Complex with Montum Resources. Now, under the deal, TransAlta will pay Montum around $8 million when the deal closes, with additional payments of up to $17 million contingent on the achievement of development and commercial milestones. Officials say the project will be developed over the next 4 years, with construction slated to begin in early 2026, with a completion date between 2028 and 2030. Today's deadline for the completion of the Rogers $26 billion takeover of Shaw Communications has been extended. The deadline has been pushed back to March 31st. It's been extended several times as the parties work with Ottawa to secure the final approvals needed to proceed with the deal. That included seeing Quebecor's Videotron subsidiary acquire Shaw's Freedom Mobile wireless business. Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne must still sign off on the transfer of wireless spectrum licenses from Shaw to Videotron. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 91 points on the day to finish at 20,515. The Dow was up 129 points to 33,826. The S&P 500 was down 11 on the day to 4,079, and the Nasdaq was down 68 points to 11,787. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $2.17 to $76.32 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 13 cents to $2.26 US. Gold was up $5.99 to $18.4236 US an ounce, and silver was up 15 cents to $21.73 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12 per bushel, barley's at $9.14, canola's at $18.31, and corn is at $11.28 per bushel. Live cattle were up 80 cents to $163.58. Feeder cattle March contract was up 30 cents to $186.53, and lean hogs April contract was down 50 cents to $85.28. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.22 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Justice Rouleau's report on if the federal government was warranted in invoking the Emergencies Act last February during the Freedom Convoy was released today. Commissioner Rouleau says Ottawa met the very high threshold needed to invoke the act. In his report, Rouleau says the lawful protest descended into lawlessness, culminating in a national emergency. He added that in his view, there was credible and compelling information supporting a reasonable belief that the definition of a threat to the security of Canada was met. Alberta Justice Minister Tyler Shandro, in a release earlier today, says the Emergencies Act was unnecessary and invoking it set a very dangerous precedent. There are some in the Christian community who are concerned that the left may be infiltrating the church. American author Lucas Miles wrote a book on the subject called The Christian Left, How Liberal Thought Has Hijacked the Church. He'll have more details for us in just a moment. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.